This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joire.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joire, and today is Tuesday, July 23rd, 2019. My guest is no other than the awesome Ken Yeung of Flipboard. Hi, Ken. How are you?
Hi, Miriam. How's it going?
Yay, I'm good. You ready to talk about some tech news and tech things?
You know, it's been a slow week. I don't actually know what's been going on. I mean, everything's just, rainbows and sunshine around here, isn't it?
I think so. You're right. It has been a slow week. I was looking at topics yesterday. I mean, it is Tuesday. It's a little earlier in the week. But, the show goes from, I usually record midweek to midweek. So basically gets published on the weekend. So whatever news is whatever news. And I mean, the big news, I think, and we'll get to that in a second, is that rumor of Apple buying Intel's modem business. That's a huge piece of news. So we should probably talk about that. But I wanted to, before we do, to kind of ease you in there, get a feel for what you do at Flipboard.
Yeah, so my role is I'm the technology editor at Flipboard. And for those that are not familiar with Flipboard, it's a content curation and discovery platform. I view it as a place where you can kind of get a comprehensive view, a story, if you will, about what you're passionate about, the topics that you're interested in. And while I'm mostly focused on technology, I mean, we have areas that we cover things such as obviously news, politics, business, sports, photography, but it's also we also serve articles from reputable and high quality publishers such as the New York Times, VentureBeat, The Verge, TechCrunch, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Bloomberg, and the like, around a host of different topics. Things such as cooking, things where you can find recipes, fashion, the arts, culture. Entertainment, all those fun things. And so my job is to kind of really surface all the relevant technology news that's happening every day and offer an editorial, a human-powered spin on what's relevant and what's everyone's talking about in terms of tech. And that's what I enjoy doing. I mean, as a former reporter at VentureBeat and the Next Web, where I believe you and I have worked alongside each other in the press pool. Yeah. I mean, that's what I enjoy doing, and being able to tell stories about these companies. And now I get to do that for the perspective of the readers, but without having to necessarily write it, but also share quality journalism as I encounter them.
Yeah, no, you're basically doing what I'm doing for the podcast. You're curating a set of news for the technology news. In my case, it's a little more focused on mobile and consumer. Mm-hmm. But I mean, basically, we're doing the same kind of stuff, and it's a lot of fun. Oh yeah. So, let's go to that first topic. Have you followed the whole saga that kind of led to this rumor?
I think in terms of when it comes down to like the big chip makers, it's almost like a soap opera. It's
That's
like
so true.
As the days go by, or as the world turns, or Days of Our Lives, or whatever you have. I mean, it's like who's doing what these days? Apple's having a tiff with Qualcomm. Now Qualcomm has a tiff with the FTC, and then Samsung, and then Apple has a tiff with Samsung, and now Intel's having a tiff with whoever, and then it's this weird who's doing what these days.
It's Days of Our Lives, the semiconductor edition.
It's like it's almost like, okay, bring the popcorn now. Next week at 12 noon, find out what Intel's going to do with their 5G modem business, and then you have that organ just like da-dun, the dramatic music type of stuff. But so it's kind of interesting what they're doing. I mean, Intel's from my understanding of what's going on in the news. I mean, this is something that could potentially be announced either this week or next week, depending on who has
by
the
time
honor
you
of
hear
announcing
this
by the
podcast,
earnings.
it might be a done deal, folks.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it won't be out till like Thursday or Friday. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Apple is going to announce their earnings next week. Intel's supposed to announce their earnings this week.
Oh, boy.
So, I mean, theoretically, I think because Apple's the buyer, I mean, who knows? They could actually be announcing it next week ahead of their earnings that they picked it up. But Intel, as I was saying, is streamlining their business. It seems the company's not doing extravagantly well as what they were back in the day, and they've given up I believe their 5G modem business, and so now they're going to sell sell the patents
exactly
and
right.
maybe their staff, according to initial reports from the Wall Street Journal, to Apple's in quote advanced talks to acquire acquire that Intel's business, and it could be for at least $1 billion, which. I mean, it's like
it actually sounds to me like a very little money, frankly. If that's such a
for something
critical
like
part of the
Apple,
smartphone business.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their Apple's earnings, and look how much they have in the bank every time, and everyone's like, okay, so they should be buying something, and that's like saying, oh, I have like $100 in my pocket, and I'm buying like a dollar soda from McDonald's or something like that. I mean, that's pocket money, so that's a very odd analogy comparing the same with Apple and Intel.
Yeah.
But I mean, Apple has the money to do that. And it makes sense and certainly takes some pressure off of Intel's whole streamlining, processor system that they want to go through.
What I find interesting about it myself is that it's like, there was this big, lawsuit between between Apple and Qualcomm. And, for years, and it got to the point where 2018 iPhones, the current set, the XS, XS Max, XR, were Intel only equipped devices. If you remember, and I say you, the audience, if you remember, the iPhone X was available in 2 SKUs, an Intel version and a Qualcomm version in the sense of the modems used. And of course, the Qualcomm version was the one to have. It outperformed the Intel version in terms of bands and all kinds of things. And I actually, when I bought my iPhone X unlocked, thankfully the unlocked version was the Qualcomm version. But I would have probably bought the Verizon version and had it unlocked if that was my only way to get the Qualcomm modem. So I was a little bummed that they went with Intel this year, because if you're used to Android, the performance of the 4G radios on current iPhones are a joke. Like, we're getting multi-gigabit speeds potentially on 4G on a phone like a OnePlus 7 Pro or like a Galaxy S10 Plus right now. And some carriers are delivering close to 5G speeds on 4G on these phones. So it was really good news when I heard them shake hands, Apple and Qualcomm, and say, okay, Apple paid us money and Qualcomm's happy, and now they're going to be... The logical conclusion was they're going to be starting using Qualcomm modems again for next year, and that could very much be the case. But at the same time, we heard that news of Intel immediately announcing, almost even before maybe the Apple Qualcomm resolution news, that they were leaving the modem business. And I actually, at the time, thought that it was kind of like the result of all this reconciliation between Apple and Qualcomm. But now I'm looking at it completely differently with this news. I'm kind of looking at it, this was kind of the whole big plan all along, where Apple was going to acquire the Intel's modem business. And if Apple does that, we know what they've done with their ARM chips. They've really become one of the premier maker of ARM chips in the world, and I would argue that the A-series chips on the iPhone are the best ARM chips today, even though I'm a big fan of what Qualcomm's doing. So it could very well be that they're acquiring the patents and kind of that base level of expertise that they need at Apple to make these great modems for their future phones, and that they're going to use Qualcomm in the interim, but one day they're just going to release their 4G, 5G modems, and they're going to kick ass. And how is Qualcomm feeling about this right now, right? Since it's a soap opera, Ken, what do you think Qualcomm's thinking right now?
Well, you're going to have to wait for a DirecTV to actually tell you what the spoilers are next week. But I think it's you nailed it. I mean, I think when Qualcomm and Apple became best buddies, suddenly, I mean, as the reports have indicated, there was certainly no love lost between Qualcomm and Apple in that battle. I mean, they were basically going to scorch the entire earth to win the battle. And basically, once the actual deal did happen, Intel looked at it and said, "Look, there's no way for us to move forward just because Qualcomm has essentially more of a lock." I think if Qualcomm had lost, that would have given Intel more of a leeway to move forward in terms of their 5G business. So since that didn't happen, they're basically saying, okay, forget it. Now you're right. Apple's whole, their way that they're doing their ARM chips and whatever they're putting into all the hardware they're putting into their phones, they're excelling at. I mean, you look at, and that's the name of the game in terms of all these phone makers these days. I mean, every phone announcement that you see from any of the big makers, they're always touting this new processor chip, this new chip, and whatnot. Is faster speeds, faster capabilities, and it's insane that these are they're always making mass improvements. So maybe they're trying to get rid of the middlemen, that being a Qualcomm and Intel, and just saying, look, we're going to do it all in house. And that gives us more control in terms of one-upping everybody else. Because at some point, the saving grade, the difference for a lot of people won't necessarily be the phone, because there's really no additional room to make on when it comes to the cameras on these phones, right? And the OSs are starting to blur together. So I mean, you basically have to get down to the nitty gritty, the actual details of the device, and I mean, will regular consumers actually recognize the difference between how fast the iPhone processor is versus the Samsung?
Yeah, no, I don't think it matters too much right now. I'm just saying that for those of us, and I'm not a spec, like I'm not a spec person. Like I can live with whatever I get. I just feel like there's if you look at that top tier market where Apple plays, that premium, it's, you kind of want the best, and they're not delivering the best, at least on the radio front right now. Right. That's all I'm saying. Like, it doesn't have to be like the best. 10% of the best would be good enough, but we're way below that. These Intel modems just completely don't perform very well.
Well, okay. Let's play a little bit of what could happen, right? I mean, you look at what. Right. Intel hasn't done fairly. The Intel's chips have fared poorly against Qualcomm, right? So Apple buys it for $1 billion. It's not the most expensive acquisition that Apple's made. They spent $3 billion on Beats. Okay, whatever. But ultimately, didn't that technology essentially wind up creating the AirPods? I mean, who knows, right? But Beats has basically been squandered. So, but let's say that Apple does buy Intel's 5G cable modem business. Oh, cable! Wow, that's weird. But they buy their modem business. So now you start to see potential of their iPhones now being more. You see more 5G type of devices coming out of Apple. I mean, Samsung basically beat them to the punch with the 5G version of the Samsung Galaxy S10.
Yeah.
Now, and then you start to see a lot more cities, a lot more of the carriers starting to support 5G that are out there. So, look, who knows what's going to happen with the new iPhones? I mean, there's reports that the new iPhone that are already surfacing around the next iPhones that'll come out, that'll be announced in September. But I mean, this is an potential opportunity for Apple to basically take an already established chip and make it better by finessing it using the Apple methodology, if you will. So this could be a very interesting time for Apple to do. And I mean, sure, their phones have probably lagged compared to everybody else, because they're like, Apple doesn't have its that je ne sais quoi anymore, right? So, but now this might be an opportunity to kind of like start to add more of these type of features that aesthetically you might not think it's that much more impressive, but the fact is that the iPhone could be that much more powerful than anybody expected because of all this new technology under the hood. And Apple just probably needs to find a way to convey that, because most people aren't that aren't spec people. They won't know. They won't care. I care if it's the name, the type of processor, but the actual speeds, I mean, it's all relative to me.
Yeah. No, I think ultimately it's an interesting announcement. I think that it kind of retroactively makes me wonder, as I said, whether this Apple and Intel had this kind of plan pretty much from the get-go. Like, I'm wondering if there weren't some talks behind the scenes where Apple said to Intel, look, we have this problem with Qualcomm. We need an interim solution. You're not delivering. We're going to acquire you. But at the same time, we're going to reconcile with Qualcomm so we can get this. And it might not have been quite that. I mean, I don't see that as a smart business decision, but also I don't see it as a very smart business decision to kind of suddenly break a tie with a longtime partner without some sort of negotiation going on. You know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I think Apple probably just decided, they hedged their bets, and it was like, look, we need to make nice with Qualcomm, because otherwise, we're screwed. But at the end of the day, we need to find ways to get around this relationship. It's a kind of like an odd relationship, kind of like, you're damned if you are, you're damned if you're not, type of relationship. So they kind of need Qualcomm, but they need to find ways to mitigate any risks. And so maybe the Intel deal will certainly help out Apple. Now, also, I mean, I know we're talking about smartphones and specifically iPhones, but I mean, what about potentially bringing in Intel's 5G chips into other Apple devices as well, and even potentially, if Apple decides to get into the self-driving car type of business, and I know they've been rumored to have that for a while. So I mean, these chips could be incorporated into the iPad Pro, or it could be incorporated into the MacBooks. Hell, maybe even to the into that cheese grater of a device that they released that they announced a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So who knows what's going to happen with what Apple could do, And I think the fact that it's in advanced talks is actually a sign that, yeah, I think you're right, Miriam, that they actually they might have had some initial casual conversations, during the trial, during the Qualcomm Apple tiff, and with Intel, and saying, hey, over
don't
drinks,
despair, we've got you, kind of thing.
Could that be could this be a thing?
We literally have got you.
Yeah. So well, yeah. So who knows what happened behind the scenes? I think that's going to take some more creative reporting than some of us are able to muster at this point. But I'm sure that story will come out.
Yeah. I mean, my impetus here is that we all know that Apple wants to be fully vertically integrated, where they create all their stuff in house, right? So it's just the logical end game for them, and so CPU, like SoC, GPU, they have that. Modem's a really big thorn on their side right now. So they are highly driven to make some sort of modem acquisition, or, get their own modems done in-house. But that's like a Herculean effort. Like, I hate to say this, but one of the reasons I like Qualcomm so much is that they're a very interesting company. Like, I don't always like the way they do business, because they kind of behave a lot like a monopoly in many ways, and I don't like that. But at the same time, I also feel that they have driven some of the highest, like the next gen of radio technology, really hard for very long, and defined a lot of it, because they really know. They really know, and they really understand this and really define it. And so, it's going to take a lot of time and work and energy for somebody to come along and compete. The only company right now that I think can directly compete with Qualcomm in radio is Huawei. Nobody else. And I'm not even talking about 5G. I'm talking purely on LTE alone right now.
Yeah, but that Huawei might have been stifled. And I mean, they're already laying off people, hundreds of people, unfortunately, as a result of No,
I'm just talking purely about the technical expertise, right? At this point, I mean, we could go down the Huawei discussion, we've done it in the podcast a lot. I don't want. I mean, it's a tangent we can take, but I feel like we've covered a lot, and I agree with you. Like, there's definitely.
What about Broadcom?
No. I mean, MediaTek would be my third candidate at that point in 5G or 4G right now. But we're looking. I mean, in terms of in-house expertise, I think Huawei is the closest thing to Qualcomm.
Right.
Whether they can use it right now in any way or not, I don't know. Obviously, they use it on their own phones.
Right.
And then 5G is the other next thing. I don't think anybody does millimeter wave at all right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's only Qualcomm, and of course, Nokia, Siemens doing the base stations. But I think that's it. If you want a 5G modem right now that does millimeter wave, there's nobody else in the world that has the expertise. I mean, Huawei's supposed to have some millimeter wave thing, but we haven't seen it yet. So they have sub-6 covered. So does MediaTek. But I wasn't just talking about 4G. I'm talking also about 5G. And in 5G, I think Qualcomm dominates. And this is going to be the challenge for Apple. Is I'm sure they can get LTE under wraps in a year or two of after post Intel modem business acquisition. But then how long is it going to take them to get? And I think sub-6 5G, they'll be fine. But I think millimeter wave 5G, which is, what AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile use on some markets, this is going to be a tough one. So,
but I'm also curious, like, will this open up another front in terms of this arms race between, big tech companies, right? I mean, you already, Apple does confirm that it's buying Intel's 5G side. Now, what's Samsung to do? What's Google to do? What is LG to do? What is Sony to do? To kind of
they're going to cozy up more and more to Qualcomm, honestly, if they haven't already, and they have. I mean,
right. But does that open up potential regulatory issues?
Oh,
for
it does.
Qualcomm?
And but that's the problem with tech industry in the US in general. I mean, I love Google. I use their stuff all the time. I'm a big fan. But the reality is they're pretty much a freaking monopoly. Every time they go talk out there and say, oh, well, there's other search engines like Wikipedia and like Yahoo. I'm like, please, who uses DuckDuckGo? Some people do, and I think
I have it installed.
I mean, some people. I know some people do, like my spouse does, and because they're really concerned about privacy and security, and I get that. But the normal person Googles, okay, there's no option here.
Yeah.
We already live in a world I'm not saying it's right. Don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that we should just leave it be. I just don't know how to fix it.
Right.
Because, I mean, why would you even want to fix it at this point? The biggest issue is not so much that there's one company that owns that. My biggest concern is that company is not acting ethically.
Yeah.
So, and that's where growing up in Europe, and I have a different view on this, but I feel that that's unfortunately where regulation needs to come in. And I don't know how much. I want as little involvement from the government here, but I do feel that we do need to put our foot down. And I don't know how you fix it. I don't know how you solve that. It's a tough one. And Facebook is another one. There's so many. The tech industry is becoming kind of all this a whole bunch of high castles out there that are just, a land of one. And it's just worrisome. But at the same time, we have much bigger problems right now with our freaking stupid regime that's stifling innovation and run by a boneheaded idiot. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be. I mean, you're already looking at things such as, even the EU and Congress is looking at big tech. So, I mean, I'm surprised that so far, Qualcomm hasn't been added to the mix in terms of companies that are getting called to testify before lawmakers. But I think it's probably only a matter of time. I mean, it'll be after this deal happens, should the Apple Intel deal happen, it'll be interesting to see how long after that does somebody raise a red flag and say, look, Qualcomm, is a monopoly, is basically like the De Beers of chips, and somebody needs to take a look at that. I mean, I believe that didn't the FTC settle with Qualcomm, or is that case still getting mulled over? I
can't remember. Sure. I'm in the same boat as you. I know there's something happened there, but I can't remember what. I mean, it could that case. I mean, could get picked up again. I mean, we're currently in this environment where anti-competitive behavior is now getting further scrutiny. So. Who knows what could happen? And I mean, you could probably see like LG. Google, Samsung probably leading the charge, but it also could open the door for or could incentivize some of the lower tier chip makers to speed up their innovation and their R&D and make enticements to say, hey, let's try this out. Honestly, that's what I feel is kind of happening. Like MediaTek is another one of my little darlings that I've been following for a while now, and I feel that. That they're the underdog here. They're like getting better and better, and not just in systems on a chip, like not just in CPU, GPU chips. They're starting to do some pretty good stuff with modems too. And of course, Huawei. And again, I don't want to, because we're almost half in the podcast and I want to get to the other topics, but I don't want to get into the whole Huawei thing, because we've talked about it at length in the show. But again, what bothers me right now is that we're stifling innovation, and in general, with the politics and the way things are going in this country in general, like by having that trade war with China and forcing Huawei out, by having that ban list. And I know it's relaxed a little bit, but that behavior is stifling innovation. And the reason for that is, if you purely look at handsets, phones, the most innovation and the most technology, the most advanced technology has come from Huawei in the last 2 years. If you look at their phones, they are way ahead of everybody else's. Like, they are so good in terms of hardware. Software still needs some work, but software is Google. So it's basically just they have a big heavy skin on there. If they lighten their skin, everything would be great. But you look at the hardware, you look at the imaging performance on their camera phones, you look at the CPU performance. They make, I praise Apple for the A series chips. I honestly think that the only chips right now that can give Snapdragon, like Qualcomm, a run for their money right now are the A series from Apple and the Kirin series from Huawei. I mean, Exynos from Samsung used to be a player. They're no longer competitive. So my point is that we need Huawei for innovation, and we need MediaTek for innovation. MediaTek is Taiwanese. Thankfully, they're not Chinese. But the thing is, I think this is the biggest problem we have right now, is that these companies like Qualcomm and Google keep acquiring all these startups that are potentially going to become competitors. And we're stifling innovation in doing that.
Yeah.
And I think we could minimize regulation if we were less greedy as businesses. If we said, okay, let's let the competition do its thing, right? But I think the system is broken right now.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is it certainly is broken, and I think right now, I think you're going to start to see a lot more consolidation. I mean, that's the current trend in business and tech in general. Companies are gobbling up other companies. It's like it's more frequent that I have seen in recent years. Even big companies spending billions and billions of dollars to acquire bigger other companies. For some adjacency or just for that technology, and then to write off, that acquisition. So, I mean, that's probably going to continue. Definitely going to see this, I guess, uproar from critics asking for regulatory reform. There will be people who are saying exactly what you're saying, Miriam, in terms of like, yeah, we need to promote innovation. We need to promote the R&D competition. We need to promote opportunities in around the world, especially in the United States, so that we are not beholden to paying Qualcomm or paying Apple, or whoever, like all of our money just so we can build something to help out society. But I think these are trends that will continue for a few years, because these are not easy things to answer by no stretch. And yeah, we all know there's plenty of articles and podcasts and videos and interviews with experts and pundits and whoever else, all like trying to opine insights. But I mean, at the end of the day, you're like, everyone's still dumbfounded in terms of like, where do we go? Like, who actually is the decision maker to make all of this, to solve all of our problems? And I mean, it's everyone has their own solution, and
I don't think there's a single
around
answer there, right?
No, there's no single answer. No, you're right.
Yeah.
But I mean, well, hey, at least it gives us some interesting talking points.
For sure. Switching gears, I want to talk to you about gaming phones.
All right.
And I know you're not really, you don't dive into phones like I do. But the listeners are like the phones. So we're going to talk about some phone stuff, but I'm kind of curious. Has it been on your radar, this gaming phone trend that started with the Razer phone a while back? Well, there's probably others that started it as well. And starting to gel into a little small side business right now. Have you been following that and looking at it at all?
Do you remember, I think it was maybe a few years ago, Motorola, they announced they had this phone. There was all these commercials. I think it was through T-Mobile, And it was one where you could attach all these different accessories like a projector or
Yeah, the
all
mods,
these
the Moto mods from Moto, and had a game controller for that. Yep.
Yeah, so this is when I read up about the Asus ROG
That's what
phone.
we're getting to, by the way, the ROG Phone II, just in case you're wondering, folks.
I mean, that's what this reminded me of. I mean, look, I do play some games, not a whole lot of games on my phone, and it's usually based off of some apps. I mean, there are definitely some more hardcore gamers on there. I think if I wanted to play games on a handheld, I would probably, at least for me, but that's because I'm old. I would get like a Switch. Nintendo Switch.
I think a lot of people would agree. I don't think it's necessarily an age thing. I mean, the problem is this, Ken, is gaming on gaming phones or gaming on phones, period. Even if you buy like a top-line flagship, like your Galaxy S10, if you buy that phone, you can game like a boss. They have the best performance. They run the newest game the best, right? But they lack some optimizations that, and you can argue that that's what gaming phones are about. These optimizations are around controls, around display, around audio, that make a case potentially for gaming phones. The biggest problem is the chicken and egg thing. The best games today don't necessarily take advantage of these optimizations. So, it's like if you get a gaming phone, yes, you might get a better experience, but only if the software supports it. And right now, very little games support these external controls and stuff properly. And, the best games are really still on Switch. So if you're going to be a mobile gamer, you're still probably better off getting a Switch, especially with the Switch Lite that came out a couple of weeks ago.
Miriam, it's all about lowest common denominator, to be honest. I mean, that's the thing in terms of like developing products and games, that I often hear. It is like people are designing games for the masses, not necessarily for the niche folks, those that want to go around playing like esports type stuff on their device. So yeah, they're going to be making it for whatever at the very least, or at the most, what is the specs that the iPhone and these high quality top tier phones, such as whether it's a Sony Xperia or it's the Samsung Galaxy S10 or so on and so forth.
7 Pro, yeah, you got it.
Exactly. They're going to be making it for those specs, but but it's interesting as you're talking with the Asus ROG phone. It almost reminds me, like, look, it is basically like getting if you're going to play a game on a laptop, right? You're not necessarily going to get like this, like this basic laptop that you might use for just general word processing, right? If you're gonna be a serious gamer, you're gonna get like a Razer computer or something.
Yeah,
like that,
and it's
right?
exactly what
top
this
of the line.
Absolutely, and that's why I think gaming phones have become a thing, because there is a very small market. Yeah. But right now it's struggling because the games are not really optimized yet for these.
It's still very much in its infancy. But I also kind of think it in a weird way, and this is like just my random brain thinking. It's almost like, have you ever seen the show Yu-Gi-Oh?
No, what is that?
Okay, Yu-Gi-Oh is basically like this. It's a card game, but there's this animated series. It came out of Japan, but I watched it way back in the day when the first series. But it's kind of it's basically this almost like Magic the Gathering kind of thing, but in the series they have what they call dual discs. So it's like, think like augmented reality gone on steroids. Okay. Or like Pokemon Go, like in real life, and you can actually see it. So say I want to do battle with you, like we meet out in like this field, and it's somehow managed to be like this augmented reality type of field. And on our dual disc, which is like this wearable, like giant pad, you would place all these cards, so it's almost like your field. So it's like, and it's all strategy. It's a typical card game, right? And then you lay these cards down. You have magic cards. You have monster cards. You have trap cards, spells, all these type of things. Typical Magic the Gathering type of thing. And as you cast something down, it would magically appear on the field, and it would do battle, that type of stuff. Oh, cool. So it basically, this is almost like if and these are for gamers, whether you're an old gamer or a young gamer or whoever. Like if you're a serious, dueler or whatever game is supported by Asus. I mean, hey, it could be Fortnite for all I know, right? Yeah. You could walk down the street. And if somebody's like, "Oh, hey, you're so and so, yeah, you're in so so, I challenge you to a duel." Okay, cool. And then instead of saying like, "Oh, hold on, let me see if I have the old, iPhone
Right.
6s. Oh, but I have the, OnePlus 6. Oh, but I can't, I don't have this feature, so I can't play, so I have to install this, blah blah blah." It's like, look, just drop this Boss ROG phone, and then you get full like this
Yeah.
whole immersive type of experience. Like it's like, holy crap, this dude is serious, or
Yeah.
this person is serious, and you're like,
And so that's actually kind of what's interesting about this phone is that, this is a second ROG phone. There was an ROG phone a year ago at Computex. I covered it. And it was basically a super high-end, flagship phone with a couple of shoulder controls that you could reassign to, like their capacitive, pressure-sensitive buttons on the frame of the phone that you could reassign to the screen, to tap the screen in certain areas.
right,
And that's a common theme amongst the gamer phones. So, the gamer phone, there's basically really like a few. There's like Xiaomi makes the Black Shark series, Nubia makes the Red Magic series, and there's 2 or 3 phones in each. Pretty much every time there's a new chip that comes out from Qualcomm, they make a new version. And then there is, of course, Razer. And there is Asus. And those are kind of the big players right now. I might be forgetting one, but those are the ones. And so Asus last year came out with just this pretty nice phone, basically kind of a flagship optimized for gaming. But what's very particular about this new one, this Asus ROG Phone II, is that it's using a new chip from Qualcomm called the Snapdragon 855 Plus that was announced last week.
again, talking about Qualcomm again.
Yeah, we have to bring it back. And Qualcomm launched that chip last week, and it's basically a slightly overclocked 855 optimized for the kind of applications like VR and gaming and AR. And so they basically, spec-wise, it's the best phone on the market because of that, because no other phones have been announced with that chip yet, number one. Number two, it's the first phone that doesn't just have a 120 hertz display, which, as you know, the iPad Pros have, the Razer phone has, but those are all IPS displays. This is a OLED display at 120 hertz. Until now, the fastest OLEDs we've had on phones and tablets and stuff, I don't think actually there's even a single tablet with an OLED display that fast, but is 90 hertz. And so the OnePlus 7 Pro, which is not a gaming phone, has a 90 hertz display. And the Asus last year had a 90 hertz display, but they've pumped it up to 120. And they've made the phone a little bigger, and it has a large battery, 6,000 milliamp hour, which is insanely big.
Wow.
The average on a really high-end Android phone today is 4,000. Between 3,500 and 4,000. That's really good normally. That's like 2-day battery life normally. This is 6,000. And we're starting to see some weird other things in these gaming phones. For example, Nubia, on their last one, which I discussed on last show, they put a built-in fan in their phone. There's a fan in the phone. It's always there. You can turn it on and off. You can control it. Asus last year had a fan accessory for their phone that clips on. And this year they have a fan accessory again on their phone that clips on, but it's quieter. So it's kind of, that what you were saying when we started this conversation, how it reminded you of the Moto mods and like all these modular accessories.
Yep.
Asus was actually the only real one. Like I think Xiaomi with the Black Shark series had some accessories like that, but last year's Asus ROG phone, the first one, was like they had a plethora of these, accessories like Wii dual controller that you clip on and dual second screen you clip on and docks for the desktop use and whatever. But this year, from what I gather, because I was at the original ROG phone launch, but not at this new ROG Phone II launch last week in Taiwan, they've gone even more overboard. There's a plethora of things the phone kind of interfaces with and pops into. So I think that's what they're trying to differentiate with. Not just do they have the best chip, the best display for gaming, but they're really pushing the envelope in terms of like the made for iPhone MFI, but for the made for ROG phone kind of,
Right.
Accessory universe. It's interesting.
Well, I think this is certainly going to advance esports to a whole new level. If this all takes off, I mean, you mentioned like what 3 or 4 companies that have similar type of these high end gaming phones, and I mean, yeah, these are based on those specs. I mean, these are soup to nuts, like amazingly powerful phones, devices, and I mean, people may not necessarily want to lug around an iPad, because you can't necessarily
Or a
play that
Switch
same
and a
games.
phone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, maybe I just carry this around and I still get like I can still duel with people. I can still battle with people. Who knows? Maybe eventually I can attach it to a bigger screen. So that way, so it's almost like it's an alternative to a Switch. So I mean, who knows where it's going to happen? I kind of like, for me personally, I think they're like ridiculous, and I probably would never. I probably wouldn't get one. Although I am kind of intrigued by just like what could be done with them. But I can certainly see the appeal for those who are hardcore gamers or who want to kind of like get more out of esports and kind of see what's out there. But like me personally, I would still stick with the traditional phones. But again, that's probably just because I'm old.
No, I feel the same way, honestly. Here's the thing, though. To me, if you buy like a Galaxy S10 Plus, like get the largest screen, right?
Right.
Well, although the S10 5G is even bigger, but that's you're buying it for 5G is expensive, and I don't recommend buying a phone for 5G right now. So let's go with the Galaxy S10 Plus or the OnePlus 7 Pro, which is, probably the two phones that have the highest spec for a non-gaming phone and have, large screens and good audio and etc. They don't have custom controls and accessories that you can pop the phone into, but they do work with any Bluetooth controller.
All right.
And so that's why I think it's a little hard to make a case for these, even though the hardcore gamer market exists in mobile, and I think it will get bigger, especially once the software and the games really support these features. But right now, it's a bit of a hard sell, even though, yeah, you can buy that Asus ROG Phone II and say, I've got the best specs this week, right? Others will catch up. And not only that, but the Snapdragon 855 normal, non-plus, that's on these two phones I just mentioned, the Galaxy S10 Plus and the OnePlus 7 Pro are, just a little, like, fractionally slower. Like, you're not gonna notice a difference when you run a game right now. So you still have a really good gaming phone in your pocket, even though it's just a Galaxy or OnePlus. So that's why it's a bit of a harder sell, right?
Yeah. What's the price point of the ROG Phone II?
It's actually cheaper than last year's. Last year's was $1,000. This year's looking at like $900, so $100 less, but it's definitely more phone than last year's.
$900 for that. I mean, I would.
It's a lot of money.
You would be able to get like 4 switches, or at least the Switch Lite.
Not to mention
that.
like 2 OnePlus 7s non-Pro,
right,
which are pretty damn great in terms of CPU performance. So they would not lag in terms of gaming. They would lack a little bit on other features that the 7 Pro has, which are like cameras and whatever, but that's not important to a gamer. So
yeah.
it's a tough one. But at the same time, Ken, you've got that, I said Nubia has a line of gaming phones. The Red Magic 3 is one I actually reviewed for Android Police recently. It was not really a review. It was more like I did kind of like the flip it on its head thing, where I said, let's use this gaming phone for everything but gaming. Like, use it as a flagship, top-of-line spec, normal phone, and see if it's a bad experience or not. And it wasn't a bad experience at all. That phone sells for $479.
Whoa!
And it has the same specs as a Galaxy S10.
But I'm wondering if this is actually going to, if the big carriers, the big phone makers are actually noticing this. And, I noticed one of the things that we're supposed to be talking about also is like the Pixel 4 rumors as well.
Well, let's jump into that, yeah.
But I mean, it's like, how are these fancy new gaming phones? Are they going to, are people going to notice, and you're going to start seeing some of that technology spread into the Samsung, like the Samsung Galaxy S10 and S10 or S11 or and so on and so forth? Because if you recall, Miriam, when we were in the trenches and we were at the briefings with Samsung and the like, they would always tout their game center of whatever Samsung has on there, right? You can share your make a GIF about your gameplay and share it with people, record it. You can also post it on like YouTube or whatever, those type of things. So there's all these type of like features that they have, but I don't think that Samsung has done anything with it. And like, imagine what could be done with VR. I mean, I'm not sure if Samsung has also given up on their VR ambitions.
No, they still have the Gear line. They
Yeah,
still
but
work
they
with
haven't really.
Oculus, you know?
Yeah, but a lot of stuff hasn't really done. A lot of these companies haven't, phone makers haven't really done a lot in terms of the gaming. So I'm
You're
wondering
right.
if they see this type of potential and they're seeing like, hey, okay, there are people that are buying the ROG phone. There are people that are buying, the Xiaomi phone and so on and so forth. Maybe they're going to be able to do that. Now, for example, going into Pixel, right? I mean, who knows if Google's going to be able to do that? I mean, you got Google Stadia that's supposed to come out, and if you're gonna be able to play that on Pixel devices, could they be taking, saying like, hey, there could be some serious gamers that are using Pixel phones, so maybe we should incorporate that into the mix. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen? I mean, Stadia still hasn't been released yet, but
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much potential. But I think based on everything that's said and done, like these gamer phones, these high-end gamer phones are certainly a niche audience. I don't see them breaking out into the mainstream anytime soon.
No,
but
neither do I. Even
knows?
the ones that cost $500. As I said, there are some
Oh, yeah.
flagship grade gaming phones out there. In the same way as there are flagship grade normal phones
Right.
that are, the Chinese are really undercutting. Like, last year was Pocophone. This year is like the Redmi K20 Pro. These phones cost $400 and are as good as the Galaxy S10 that costs $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And then at a lesser extreme, you got the OnePlus 7 Pro, which costs $670 and is as good as a Galaxy S10 Plus.
Yeah.
So it's not a price thing. It's more of you're right, is there a market for this? And I think that's why you're not seeing Samsung jump into it yet, because I'm not sure that Asus is selling enough of it. I think they just want to drive it because they have an ROG brand, which is their Republic of Gamer laptop brand, and they want to kind of expand into the smartphone business. And I think the Chinese and the Taiwanese, in this case with Asus, are going to drive this hard in the next little while, more than the Samsungs and the Googles. Even though Google has Stadia, it's much more likely for Google to make like Moto did, a dock that you put your Pixel in that has the controllers on it, right? That turn your Pixel into like basically a Switch Lite. Then, or a third party to come along and make that for Google, with the Stadia branding on it, rather than them making a dedicated gaming phone. Because again, as I said, the specs are pretty close. And so I think for Samsung, it's really a wait and see game. They don't really have that gaming pedigree that Asus does, and they don't have the kind of like innovative, let's go out there and make cheap phones that are specialized like the Chinese do, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's a tougher sell for them, and it's again the chicken and egg. Until there's more games that demand specialized hardware, it's gonna be hard, and it's hard to imagine that games would demand specialty hardware, because for a game developer that would limit your scope. And mobile is all about numbers, right? Yeah. It's like you have billions of potential customers. Why would you limit yourself, right? So I think it's interesting. But back to the Pixel 4, I think the leaks are just showing that forehead, the bezel at the top of the phone is still more pronounced than the bezel at the bottom of the phone. We knew that from the leaks so far. But this rumor here is about, there's in addition to all the openings up there that, exist for the earpiece and the front cameras, there's another oblong opening that is very interesting. It might indicate maybe a time of flight Face ID like camera system, or that Google solely radar detecting gesture control sensor might be up there. You've heard of this?
Yeah, I've read the articles, and look, I think it's kind of hilarious that Google's like, look, everyone, we're done playing the leaking game. We're just going to drop it and acknowledge that it's going to happen, and then everything else all the press can stop bothering us about is this confirmed? Is this confirmed? So yes, the Pixel 4 is happening, but now the particulars are starting to come out, and I don't anticipate there's nothing. Well, I mean, I think it's basically with the new Android OS. This phone is all going to be about like whether it like accessibility or ease of use, right? I mean, if this has face recognition, if this has has a way to recognize hand gestures, those type of things, it's Google's whole point is to try and make this phone easier to use, and so that the phone is working for you as opposed to you using the phone, right?
Right. Yeah.
And of course, when we talk about, hey, Google's using face recognition, that's sure to have like people like up in arms, like, oh my God, face recognition!
Well,
oh my God, what are you doing? Privacy, privacy. So I mean, yes, let's get that out of the way and see what Google does to address the elephant in the room, especially as they're under fire for other stuff as well. But look, I think this is going to be an interesting phone. The Pixel 3 has been a spectacular phone. Even the Pixel 3a that was released,
especially the 3a,
at Google I/O is a lower cost version, but it's still spectacular. And the fact that the Pixel series are still way less than the high end phones that you would get like from Samsung or Apple. So that's certainly a good sell. And plus, it's you have basically the native integration with Google. You don't have all that bloatware as per usual. So I think it's going to be an interesting device. I think aside from the small, all these hardware changes kind of seem very, they're nice to have. Nice, like it's pretty cool to see these type of things. But nothing about the Pixels, every iteration of the Pixel necessarily blows me away.
No, and that's how Pixels are, right?
Right, and it's a software.
The
it's
hardware
Google software that's going to
okay,
be
but yeah. I mean, for me, what stands out here, and I just want to make it clear, almost every Android phone sold today has face identification for unlocking, right? Like some sort of camera-based Face ID type equivalent to the iPhone. That's no brainer. Even,
Samsung has that. Apple has that. But here's the thing.
But I was gonna say what's really interesting is, as you know, on Android, nobody lets you use that face authentication for payment. Apple is the only one because it has basically a proper 3D scan of your face, which is much more secure than all the Android phone that do face unlock on 2D on a normal camera. There's a few with time of flight, like the Mate 20 Pro and the LG G8, but they don't have the hooks in Android to make that a secure enough to use for payment. So you still have to use your fingerprint to unlock or type a code, a lock code to unlock your phone for payment. So to me, this looks like, together with the rumors of what's coming with the next version of Android, it looks like the Pixel 4 might finally be the first Android device with face unlock that competes directly with Face ID on the iPhone and the iPad, insofar that it will unlock the phone for payments.
Well, I think it's certainly possible. I mean, I think you're starting to see this tit for tat, between Android and iOS. Whatever Apple does, Google does, or whatever Google does, Apple does.
But it's been 2 years, right? Think about this.
Well, I mean, you look. I mean, wasn't it that at when Apple announced the Memojis, right?
Yeah.
Then I think the next year at I/O, Google announced something similar.
I think it was Samsung first.
Samsung or some. Yeah, you're right. It was Samsung. It's not Google. But I mean, it's like that. The Android ecosystem will do a tit for tat type of thing with Apple. So I mean, I think Google's whole AI and potential for facial recognition will certainly will play a bigger factor in with the Pixel 4. I think it has to, because that's probably Google's biggest strength when you bring it into the what people want out of their phones. What do they consider innovations, right?
Yep.
So this is going to be an interesting thing for what the Pixel 4 will be, what the technology will be, and whether or not they have ways to counter criticism. So yeah, I mean, will the Pixel 4 counter the photo test? The test where, hey, I can take a picture of you, Miriam, and hold it up to your phone, and will your phone unlock it because it sees a picture of you versus actually seeing you?
Right.
Or the twin test, right? If you have a twin, will that work, right? And all these type of things.
We'll see. I mean, I think it's interesting that, leaks and rumors are always interesting because you kind of like get little piecemeal pieces that kind of make you scratch your head and go like, okay, let's speculate and stuff.
But isn't it fun to just think about crazy stuff like that?
Absolutely. Speaking of payments, I want to talk about LG Pay briefly, just mostly to chuckle because look, the reality is this. it's now available in the US. Like anybody's going to care. Number one, LG, I love what they do. I love their phones. They're really nice phones, but they've really not been competitive and they've really not been trying very hard. And they're so irrelevant to the US market right now, just as a phone manufacturer, never mind that the fact that they have their own payment method that is now officially available here. I don't think too many people use Samsung Pay. And that's, Samsung's own, and there's a lot more Galaxies out there. I think the reality is this. Mobile payment is broken in this country. It's just doesn't, people are not using it. Like I am. You might be. Right. A lot of the journalists and YouTubers and tech folks and a lot of my audience, I would argue, probably uses it. But the reality is I use Google Pay because it works on all the phones and I review multiple Android phones. And as long as you have NFC, it works. And a lot of people, I think the majority of people who use a mobile payment in the US probably use Apple Pay because Apple's really marketed it. And I think if you go out there to a coffee shop that has the device and the terminal and is aware of the fact that you can pay with your phone by tapping, if you ask them what that's called, everyone will say Apple Pay. They won't say Google Pay, even though the terminal supports it. They won't say contactless payment. They won't say mobile tap payment. They will all say, Apple Pay. So I think Apple's definitely won that battle, at least in the US. And I think Google is a close second in terms of use, probably sharing equal, prevalence as Samsung. What makes Samsung interesting and different is that they both support contactless like NFC payment, as well as they're able to, they bought a company that basically lets payments be done by tapping a phone on a terminal that doesn't have NFC by creating a magnetic field that replicates you swiping the card in a card reader. So it's a very unique, different differentiator for them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting because that technology replicates swiping a credit card. And it's less secure because of that, but it works on terminals that don't support any kind of contactless payment, NFC-based payment. So the question is, I'm not sure how LG Pay works. I assume it's just pure NFC like Google Pay and Apple Pay, in which case, why would you even bother? If your LG phone supports Google Pay, then just put Google Pay on there, enable that. Why would you put your credit cards into another silo that's specific to LG when the chance of you having an LG phone next time around, even if you got a good deal from Sprint this year, is almost null, right? Considering how their track record with sales in the US.
So there's several points here. I think one, it's to your statement is like you don't know how it, LG Pay works, and I don't even know how that works. But here's the thing with Apple Pay, it's like when I had an iPhone, it just worked. I would go up to a device to a terminal and hold down. It would immediately recognize that I'm about to make a payment, and I just authenticate, and boom, I was like, oh my god, this is magic, and I would walk away, right? And now the thing with when I'm an Android, this is the thing where I'm kind of hesitant to use Apple Pay or Android Pay or Samsung Pay, just because it's like every time I've tried it, it's like at a grocery store, it's like I'm not really sure. Because they say like, oh, you just unlock your phone. So I unlock my phone and then you just hold it up to the terminal. I hold up the terminal. It doesn't work. I'm like, what's going on? It doesn't seem as...
I think you need to try it again, Ken, because it works every time now.
Okay, well...
Pretty much any place that takes Apple Pay now will take Google Pay if your phone
What about Samsung Pay?
No, I'm not talking about Samsung Pay.
I think I had set up Samsung. I don't remember, but it's like
no Samsung Pay. That's the problem. Samsung Pay is not as reliable unless you use the NFC part of it, which you can't control. It's just going to use whichever is the terminal supports. And no, try Google Pay because it's a direct clone of Apple Pay. And in the early days, it had some growing pains, but I've been using it extensively for about 5 years now, and it works pretty much anywhere Apple Pay works.
I think this to the point is like, why is LG doing it? I think at the end of the day, it's all about branding. It's all about branding and a potential ecosystem at play here.
But they don't even have an ecosystem in the US anymore. They're barely selling phones. So why bring this to the US?
Okay, wait. Well, I think they got it. There are selling LG phones. I presume.
Well, they are. Probably I've tested them. I've reviewed them. They exist, but it's such low numbers.
You tested them, but you didn't buy them. So they're looking at. I presume like people have actually paid them money for their phones. Very similar to somebody has paid Amazon for their awful Fire phone, and basically paid Facebook for their awful Facebook home phone
Oh my
back in the
God.
day. Yeah, pour one out for that one.
HTC first.
But I think here's the thing: is like, yeah, so it's all about branding, because it's like, look, LG could do, and LG phones probably also have Android Pay, guaranteed, because if
They do.
yeah. So same thing. Every Android phone has Android Pay on it, but but those that have their own makeshift type of payment type of thing, Samsung Pay is added on to it. I mean, is it unnecessary bloatware? Probably. Same thing with LG phones, right? So LG Pay is now probably going to be on the phones as is Android Pay. So, but here's the thing. And this is pure speculation, because who knows what the hell can happen. But you have this LG ecosystem. They make a host of different products besides phones. They make monitors, they make, I think, fridges and all these other appliances and whatnot. Who knows if that all will come into play in terms of some payment ecosystem type of deal. I mean,
you're right. I mean, in Korea, that makes perfect sense. Like, I don't have a problem with it.
But
right?
But your point is, like, why in the US? It's the biggest market. If it succeeds here, maybe there's adoption elsewhere. I'm not exactly sure. I mean, maybe to raise the profile of LG, saying, "Hey, we're innovating."
I think it'll fail.
I mean.
That's all.
It might just be one of the. It might be an actual, like, a quote unquote experiment, right? It's like, okay, we tried it out for 2 years and we won't say anything, and it just kind of fades away.
Yeah, for sure.
You're like, what happened to LG Pay? Like, what are you talking about? We didn't do anything with it.
I looked at it, by the way. It's like Samsung. It supports both the NFC tap side, so contactless like Apple and Google do, but it also supports that magnetic strip spoofing by like generating magnetic pulses, which is, again, they must have bought that patent from Samsung, which bought that company, US company that invented that idea. Not as secure, but look, the reality is Google Pay works pretty much where Apple Pay works today. And you can, even a phone that costs $200, $250, like, mid-range phone, as long as it has NFC, will just work. And, it's best to combine it with a fingerprint, just like the older iPhones, because you just, your phone can be completely off. You hold the fingerprint sensor you tap it with your finger, and you, at the same time as you tap the phone on the terminal, and it just works, right?
Yep.
Unless you're a masochist and you want to type in a code every time. And on a modern iPhone, it's the same, but with your face. And obviously on the Google Pixel 4, if it supports proper face authentication for payments, which no Android phone does today, then it'll be the same with either your fingerprint or your face. Yep. Assuming the Pixel 4 even has a fingerprint sensor at this point, there is no sign of it. It could be under the display, which is very common on modern Android phones, but it could also be that they're banking on what Apple did and do full Face ID for everything. So it'll be interesting. I just thought it was a bit of a chuckle when I was like, really, LG? Like, 5 years ago, when you had more market penetration and you were more relevant in the US, and Samsung was rolling out Samsung Pay, I can see you coming out and say, "Oh, rah, 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 we're here with LG Pay." But in 2019, it seems like a Me Too. We checked the box. We can now report to the CEO that we've got LG Pay in the US.
You might as well just start writing headlines and basically saying, okay, Nokia Pay, BlackBerry Pay, I don't know. I mean, okay, you could say Xiaomi Pay, but I mean, I think they actually
there's a Mi Pay,
but it's not available in the US because you can't really bet the Xiaomi phones here.
No, I mean, it's like, WeChat Pay is really, the way to pay there.
Well, I mean, China and Asia have just basically their talk about innovation over there. That's for another show. I mean, but they're just insane compared to what we have here. We're like, oh, what is this LG Pay? Like, what the hell is this? Why do we need this? But you go over there like, I'm just, look, let me hold my beer. Here's how we do it. Beep, 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 done. You're like, oh my God, like, you guys are so advanced.
Totally. We should wrap up. I want to talk about just mention a couple of things real quick. HTC launched a couple of phones with the Wildfire brand, HTC Wildfire something, E Plus and E1.
Wait, HTC is still around?
Yeah, they still make phones, mostly in Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if these phones are coming to the US, but it's what's interesting. The news part here is not that HTC is making phones still and that they launched two very boring mid-range, low-end-ish phones. Is that the branding Wildfire was used in the early days of HTC for some really nice phones. So It's interesting that they're recycling this.
Everything old is new again. I mean, it's like bring it all back.
Yeah, and so that's really all I have to say here. I just want to say, wow, HTC, you're really clinging on here. We love you. It's kind of like LG. You're kind of dead in the water in the US, but additionally, I don't have time to expand on it, but I will promise you to talk about it next week. I've developed my own scoring system or rating system for smartphones and devices. It's a bit interesting. I tested this on Twitter. If you want to read my Twitter, and you'll read about it. I scored most of the big phones with it already. Just look for the Tankerl score, TNKGRL score, no spaces, as a hashtag, and you will find my ratings. I can't expand on it right now. We don't have time, but I will talk to you about it next week, if the reason for you to come back. Also, next week, potentially, I've got a few new devices in my stable that arrived for me to play with. Xperia 1 from Sony, their flagship phone. A T-Mobile Revelry Plus, which is basically a Moto G7 Plus rebranded for T-Mobile. I was kind of curious because there were rumors that that's what T-Mobile was doing, rebranding the Moto G7, which is a really great mid-range phone, and it definitely looks like that what they did. So I'll let you know how that works. And I got a Dell Chromebook, a rugged 11-inch 3100 2-in-1 convertible Chromebook. The reason for that is because I've been looking for something I can take on camping trips that's super rugged, but that's really cheap and easy to use. It's a $419 laptop. I mean, it's not cheap for a Chromebook, but it's rugged, so it's cool. And it's mostly sold on education markets, so I don't know if you'll be able to buy one. I'm pretty sure you can still go to the Dell website and buy one. But they sent me one, and I'll let you know what life is like when you're used to using like a Pixel book, a really high-end Chromebook all the time. How is it going down to a $400 11-inch Chromebook, but conversely that has really long battery life and is really rugged? So I'll let you know. I'll let you know next week. Tune in for that. Ken, do you want to tell people where they can find you on the internet? I obviously Flipboard, but I'm talking about like your social media handles, other projects you might be working on that you want to drop a bunch of URLs for.
Oh, sure. So, I mean, yes, you can obviously find me on Flipboard, flipboard.com/@theKenYeung. Obviously, please do sign up and use Flipboard. You'll find some very, very interesting stuff there. We are curating all sorts of things such as funding news, long reads, general tech news, and obviously podcasts. So you can find this episode in our tech podcast magazine coming up soon. Also, you can definitely find my blatherings and my rants and my crazy old guy yelling at the clouds tweets on Twitter at the Ken Yeung, TheKenyeung. You go to the other one, the wrong spelling, and I'm not sure who that is, but be sure to say hi. Also, similar on the Facebook and the like. But yeah, you can certainly Google me, and I am around. But certainly drop me a line if you are on Twitter.
Are you on Instagram at all?
I am on Instagram. I am also at the Ken Yeung, TheKenyeung. I keep spelling it almost like I'm a part of the Mickey Mouse Club, which is very, very hilarious.
Oh, it's good because mine is weird to spell too, so I support you having to spell it out. It's smarter to spell it out, spell it out. Also, I want to say I use Flipboard. I love it. I've been using it since day one. It is my favorite go-to way of consuming news. I highly, highly recommend it. It's such an easy app to install, and it's spectacularly beautiful on tablets.
Oh yeah,
highly recommend it.
And it's great on every phone imaginable. I mean,
Correct.
This is a really great app, and obviously I'm biased because I work here, but before I worked here, I am and have been an avid user of Flipboard, and it's absolutely amazing. So please do give it a try, and if you have any questions about it or you want to talk tech, do hit me up.
Yes, do hit Ken up on the Twitters. You know where to find me. I'm at Tankerl on Twitter. That's TNKGRL. It's the same handle on Instagram for pretty photos of phones and pretty photos taken with phones. I'm a bit of a photographer hobbyist when it comes to mobile photography. But also there's a YouTube channel, youtube.com/MiriamJoire, my full name spelled out. If you don't know how to spell my name, go to my Twitter. It's there. Just drop that space between the first and last name. put it in the URL for YouTube and you're good to go. There's a bunch of videos, hands-ons, sometimes reviews, but mostly unboxings. I want some visual context for the devices we talk about. So I try to get my hands on all the devices we talk about, and eventually you'll see a video probably about that ROG Phone II, I hope, and et cetera, et cetera. The other thing I want to say is the podcast. If you stumbled upon the podcast by accident because of Ken curating it on Flipboard, then, well, you want to subscribe. And how do you do that? Well, mobiletechpodcast.com is the URL. It has an RSS feed there. You can subscribe that way. Or you can just go to Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, even Spotify, and TuneIn Radio, and just type in Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, or sometimes just Mobile Tech Podcast is enough, and boom, there you are. Subscribe, please. Subscribe to the YouTube. Tell your friends, disseminate this if you enjoyed the show. And I also want to thank our sponsor. We have a sponsor, a longtime sponsor on the show, Audible. Audible.com is the place for audiobooks. If you like audiobooks or you like books in general, but maybe you're a delivery driver and you have to drive all day and you can't read the books, but you want to listen to the books or listen to the podcasts, Audible is where you want to go. It's pretty awesome. And because you're wonderful listeners, I have a deal for you. If you are not yet an Audible customer and you want to join, you want to try it out, not only do you get a 30-day free trial, but you get to keep the one book that you downloaded and really like at the end of this free deal, even if you don't continue. So in the show description, there is a link to support the podcast and get that deal. And it's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So if you want to support the podcast, if you don't have Audible yet and you love books and you particularly having them read to you for whatever reason, maybe read by the author. There's a lot of selection and the authors often read their books, which I think is really awesome. Check out Audible and support the podcast. We appreciate it. And we also appreciate Ken for being on the show today. Thanks, Ken.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we'll have you back sometime to have ramblings about all that. I love how we went deep into some really good stuff today. That's exactly what this show is all about. So if you're listening, folks, today, come back next week for another show. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.